And we're live. So, welcome back to another episode of these LinkedIn lives that we're doing. I hope everyone's having a great week. I actually have had a few days away because it was my birthday on Saturday. So, I had a few days taking a bit of time on. I didn't take time away, but just unwinding to my usual degree. And it's great to be back with you now. And we've got a great guest with us, Nigel Cannings from Intelligent Voice. Nigel, how are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, great, and happy birthday, Tom, as
Cheers, man.
well. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to celebrate these things when they come up. If you can't do it, then what are you going to celebrate, really?
Yeah, it was the big 30, so it's
Oh,
quite a big one. Yeah,
right.
a lot of activities. Went and played some golf and went water skiing and had a weekend of fun. It was a lot of good fun.
Nice, nice. Yes, I dimly remember my 30th. Long time ago, sadly. Long time.
Well, I get told, Nigel, that the 30s, like my brothers told me, and like everyone that's I've spoken to, they're like the 30s, like some of the best years of your lives. And I was just like, well, 20s are pretty good to me, so I'm excited to see what the 30s bring.
Nah, Tom, it's your 50s, the best years of your life. Trust me.
I love it, mate. I love it. That's where I want to get. Yeah, I'll hold you to that when we're having the next conversation. But
Definitely.
Nigel, give us a bit of a background then. Who are you, and how did you get into this role? How did you come up with this idea for Intelligent Voice, and what led you to what you're doing today?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a slightly tortured backstory because I'm actually a lawyer by training. So there you go. I've said it out loud now,
There
so
you go.
everyone knows.
Yeah.
Doesn't go down well with Americans, that one usually, but the Brits can just about cope with it. So sorry to the international audience for that one. But yeah, I actually started life as a lawyer, but I've always loved technology
Mm,
my whole life, and I was actually really lucky because my dad sold the first ever personal computers in Europe in
really?
1978. Absolutely, the first Commodore PET, the Apple II, all of those,
That's awesome.
he sold them.
Yeah,
Honestly, unbelievable. So from the age of 10, I
yeah,
was kind of growing up around the very first computers.
yeah,
And my dad, brilliant salesman, absolute luddite when it comes to technology.
yeah,
But I, on the other hand, I just took a shine to it.
yeah,
And anyway, I loved all this. I mean, I love playing with them. I love, tinkering them, programming them, everything like this.
yeah.
And I I was lucky enough to spend a year in the States when I was 17. I did a year of high school in the States,
Nice.
which was amazing. And I came back. I remember walking into my dad's office and I said to him, I said, I want to do what you do because I was so in awe of what he'd achieved with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and swore at me for the first time in my entire life. And he said, "If you've got any effing idea how hard this has been," he said, "Get a proper job, and if you want to do all this sort of stuff afterwards, then do." So I did, and so I became a lawyer. I mean, I was one of the first tech lawyers in London, people actually dealing specifically with tech, and I worked for a number of big technology companies and that type of stuff. And then I made some money out of share options in the big dot-com boom. I was really lucky, got out, had a few quid in my pocket, went and saw my dad and said, "Right, I'm ready." And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "No, that conversation we had when I was 18, right? I'm ready." And he said, "Well, no idea what you're talking about." So I'd kind of lived with this kind of, I'm going to be an entrepreneur for about 14 years. And
Yeah.
my old man just said, no, he was just trying to get me out of his office. So, so I invested in some small software companies. But it's about 14 years ago now. So 2008, big financial crisis.
Yeah.
I came from a legal background, and clearly a lot of the things that had gone wrong in the financial crisis were because of people messaging kind of out of band. So they were doing it on instant messaging and email and this type of stuff,
Yeah.
and no one had been reading it. And I kind of had this idea that maybe if we could take all communications, and this included phone, because at the time no one was doing any phone monitoring, if we could take email and IM and voice and all this type of stuff and kind of listen to it, quote unquote, using computers, maybe we could help stop the next big financial crisis. We could stop people communicating out of band and help the compliance effort.
Yeah.
So I started a company that was dedicated to doing that, and that was the precursor to Intelligent Voice. So um, yeah, and voice technology was the answer. Voice technology, there's a load of people trading on the phone, talking on the phone all the time, and it just turns out that I was basically 14 years too early. But apart from that, the thing's gone absolutely totally to plan so far.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear because I see voice. That's why I've got so many questions for you, as many we can fit in today around voice, and just see how it's increasing. People want to use it, and I remember Nigel. Well, I say I remember. It's still pretty weird to some people, but like I went to go visit my mate over in South America, and they're very clued up. They use voice notes all the time. Like they're always WhatsApping through voice notes. Over here, I started sending voice notes, and people were like, "Why are you sending me a voice note for?" And it was just this whole like adoption thing of like using voice. But now a lot of my friends send me voice notes. Well, not a lot, but a good portion of my friends send me voice notes. And I look at it as adoption just through that, let alone what I want to go into today with how it can be used in emergency services, how it's going in like insurance. You've probably got a good idea around that, or maybe around law or things that you've been involved with. It's pretty wild, isn't it? Like how that adoption has taken this long. But the phone was around miles before, so I never get it. I'm like, you used to speak to people on the phone. Why is it so weird now to send you a voice note? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think voice is a very personal thing, and people often say to me, why is it taking so long for people to adopt voice technology? And it's really simple. That if you're standing on a train and you want you want to communicate with someone, you're not gonna you don't want to send a voice note. You don't want to say I'm not going to say it now because my phone will start doing stuff. But hey, phone name, send send Tom a message which says X, Y, and Z. So we're really kind of tied to those to the kind of the ordinary phone interface and computer interface. And a lot of people remember, particularly people of kind of my vintage in tech, remember a big stuff around IBM Via Voice and Dragon Speak Naturally, or whatever it was, where the promise was you could sit there and talk to your computer and words would come out. And that is true. I mean, words did come out, just the wrong ones. So it was, and the trouble is, as human beings, we're really, really picky. So in kind of in human machine interactions, unless it's absolutely spot on every time, we reject it. So that's why it's taken a long time for things like Alexa to come on, for example. Because if you think about Alexa is really, in technological terms, it's actually really simple. It's a beamforming microphone, and those have been around for 100 years, with a small microprocessor connected to the internet. And then at the other end, there's a speech recognition engine and a rules engine, and that's kind of it. But it took a really long time, and still research shows that most people only use it for three things. So I mean, they're playing music, or they're listening to news, or they're switching the lights on. Those are the three. Honestly, those are the three top things that people. And I'm as guilty as anyone. That's all I do with mine as well. So voice is a really kind of specific tool. It's great. It's great at what it's great at. I think that's the point. But there's a whole load of areas, you're absolutely right, which we're really only beginning to scratch the surface on. And that's because the technology hasn't really been there until the last kind of 3 or 4 years, where there's been this sea change in terms of the ability for computers to understand humans, particularly in major languages like English, Mandarin, smatterings of others. And we can talk a bit more later about what you might call low resource languages in terms of where they're coming on. But it's taken a long time for the technology to really get to the point where it can be used in a consumer type of setting. But in a business setting, done right, we've actually managed to, for the last, as I said, kind of, I've been doing this 14 years now, we've actually been able to apply it to very specific use cases. And those use cases started off in financial services with literally listening to phone calls that traders were making in banks. So all banks have got a compliance monitoring department. So you see, we see these things on the TV with banks of phones, and all these guys got one phone here and one here, and the sport box where they're shouting out, sell 57 for you or whatever.
All the stock market films where it's like Margin Call or something, or Wolf of Wall Street, like sell, like
exactly. But that's real life. I mean, that is real life. And the thing is, theoretically, a bank is responsible for everything that's said on there because everything is recorded. But historically, all they've done is what they call dip sampling, which is basically we'll pick a random half an hour of audio to listen to.
Yeah.
Well, the chance of actually finding someone saying anything bad in that is really unlikely. So what we've developed over the years is a tool set which enables the system to really understand what traders are saying and financial people are saying. It's interesting because you had someone on from Speechmatics last week who was talking about the
Yeah.
difficulty of financial services speech recognition. And
Yeah.
it's really hard because they use weird jargon. And so a lot of our work is in working with these types of organizations. So, but also to blend it with other tools.
Yeah.
Because just listening to audio is all right, but you've got to also listen to the email and the instant messaging. And so a lot of the work that we do is bringing all of those things together
Yeah.
holistically, and then saying, if you take them all together, can we see patterns of bad behavior?
Yeah.
and
Well,
and that and that kind of then stepped over into other areas like insurance and healthcare and law enforcement.
yeah, like duplicating the idea or being able to copy patterns from it and move it across. But do you think, because this is a conversation I was having with someone the other week, and maybe a month, yeah, maybe it's more like a month ago. But we were looking at like NLU and NLP, and we were looking at what they can do. And I'm sure you'll be much more clued up than I am, being around the voice for 14 years and probably before that, to give you the idea to going into this. But do you think like there's and just a general question for people that are in banking can be very fraudulent, and whether that's internally or externally, people being caught with words that are being said or with text being said to catch. I mean, you always see it. Like there's certain incidents today, like how Nancy Pelosi's got away with this, not from a political side, whether you agree with it or not, but there's clearly things that might have been shared to give her that idea. But you think, is that good, or can voice be used? I guess what I'm asking, for that cyber risk or for that kind of fraudulent kind of angle. What do you think?
Yes and no
Yeah.
is the simple answer. So, I mean, let me give you some examples. So, a lot of the work we do is in biometric technology. So, understanding who is talking.
Right.
So, and again, this is an area that's moved on a lot with kind of growth of AI and neural networks. The ability to, so I can program something to recognize me and say it's me and it's not you.
Yeah.
And
Like
and
banking's doing, so they can literally say on the voice, like, just say your name, and it's like, I think Halifax do it with me, and like say it, said it right.
exactly.
Yeah.
But what people don't know, and I've got to be slightly careful about what I talk about publicly because there's some things
Yeah.
which people really don't want to get around, but that has to be part of a multi-factor authentication regime. So if you called in from an unknown number, because you're probably calling from your mobile when you
Mm.
call the bank, so
Yeah.
they know that mobile belongs to Tom. So that's
Yeah.
one factor of authentication. So you use the voice as a second factor of authentication,
Yeah.
where so actually, and that's why I say yes and no. So yes, it can be used, but it has to be used. Your voice is not your password.
Yeah. It's
There was
context.
one
Yeah.
one one banker a while ago said your voice is your password, and then a couple of BBC journalists turned up and proved it really wasn't. And of course the bank's tightened it up now and everything's so much better. But so you can use it like that, and we do a lot of work in fraud detection using voice, but a
Yeah.
lot of that is it's not just how you say things, it's what you say.
Yeah.
And so really simple example. So if I ask you your name, if I say what's your name, you'll say Tom Allen, and there'll
Yeah.
be a very slight pause, and you'll give me a name. And if I ask you what your date of birth is, I can work that out because it was last Saturday. So, and you were 30. But so I now know this. You see, I can go and phone up your bank and pretend to be you.
Yeah.
But these are questions that we answer naturally, and so there is a latency involved in that, and we can detect when the question was asked and when the answer was received, and we then know that you answer factual questions in a particular way. So
Yeah.
if I then go on, so if we then to say talk about insurance claims, so let's say we then talk about an insurance claim. I ask you questions about it, and I say, what time of day did it happen? And you'll say, and you'll probably go about 10,
Yeah.
because if you said 10:37 immediately, the system would know that that was a learn answer
Yeah.
because you said it too quickly
Yeah.
for something that you wouldn't automatically recall, and it's too precise.
Yeah.
So, and this is, I'm not giving too many lessons to fraudsters here, right? But these are very specific things. Or let's say that you say I kicked over a can of paint.
Yeah.
And there was a little spate of these things going on a few years ago. And so you kicked over a can of paint, and I ask you, what color was it?
Yeah.
Now, if it really happened, then you would say blue, right? It's something you know. You leave a certain period of time, you go blue. If you stop and pause for too long, it shows you're thinking.
That's
If you
fine.
go red, it shows you're making it up. So actually, there's lots of things we can do, and that's a combination of speech recognition, of kind of getting the words there, but also using NLP techniques, natural language processing techniques in the
Yeah.
background to process things like sentiment and intent and understanding. And
Yeah.
so you
Error.
can use it, but again, it's an indicator rather than an absolute. So let me posit another thing. I'm not going to make this run on for 7 hours, Tom, but let me
I
just
like
posit
this.
something
No,
else.
this is
So,
cool. Yeah.
um, so the system might say that you're being deceptive. So that would show as deceptive behavior. But of course, the reason you're being deceptive may have nothing to do with the insurance claim. So going back to, let's say that I ask you to account for your whereabouts on a particular day, and
Yeah.
you're very hazy around what happened at sort of 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Now, that's deception. The system is like, well, and there's other ways in which people express deception. There's ways in which you drop pronouns, and there's all sorts of ways you speed up how you talk to try and get through the thing. But the reason you might be deceptive is because you were just somewhere you weren't supposed to be.
Yeah.
So
You settle.
you weren't, you're actually seeing someone who wasn't your partner, for
Yeah.
example, or you're actually out robbing a completely different bank at the time. But so there are so you have to be really careful with these fraud techniques which relate to voice and the way people speak. They're
Yeah.
indicators of deception. They don't necessarily mean that you're lying in the context that you're lying
Yeah.
in.
I love that because I'm basically picking up it's all very context driven. And I don't know why, Nigel, it's reminding me. Have you ever seen the film Sully about the pilot? It was got Tom
Oh,
Hanks in it.
love that. Absolutely
Great.
love that. Yeah,
It's a great
brilliant.
film, isn't it? And they're
Yeah,
without giving it well, the whole story is a published story, but it's where they're basically trying to capture if it was it probable that they could have got to the airport or not and avoided a crash or whatever. And then there's that point where Tom Hanks is just like, "Can we get serious?" Because they're like, "You're not accounting for human error here." And I feel like that's the kind of same thing with this, right?
yeah.
There's human error maybe if you say it too quick, or there's a human error if you're saying it too long. Like like it starts making you jaded, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you've got to allow for that margin of error in there. But with that, these are fantastic tools to then kind of pass something on to a trained human, for example.
Yeah.
So insurance companies have got teams of trained people whose job it is to do follow-up interviews. And
Yeah.
really all you're doing is you're using the system, the computer, to help funnel things to people.
Yeah.
Right, so it's better selection of things. But of course, with the advent of GDPR and lots of privacy legislation, you've also got to be able to show why the system took the decision that it did.
Yeah.
And this is tripping a lot of people up at the moment because they're just putting these black box systems in place. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, computer says no. That's not good enough. You actually have to be able to demonstrate. And a lot of the work that we do is
Yeah.
around explainable AI.
Yeah.
And I said this to someone the other day, we shouldn't really call ourselves intelligent voice anymore because we do so much more than just voice. A lot of the stuff we're doing is in kind of,
Yeah.
pure play NLP, and that type of stuff. But yeah, it's about, we built one of the first explainable AI systems, which
Yeah.
actually, for things like sentiment, for example, if, you go onto Amazon, it'll tell you, that was 76% positive. Question
Yeah.
is why? Why has the system decided that? So you've actually got to, AI has got to the point now where we have to make it talk back to us
Yeah.
because there are so many issues with bias and hate speech coming out of things like GPT-3.
Yeah.
It's explainable AI. For me is one of the next huge areas that
Mm.
has to be explored properly. It's just moving far too quickly at the moment.
Yeah. But if you take these kind of areas then, so if it is being used in emergency services where people's lives are on the line potentially, whether it's on the police side or whether it's with the healthcare side or whatever side you want to look at it, are these I kind of get it how big are these opportunities? I don't want to look at risks. Obviously, there's going to be. I always look at new things, and everyone. I'll tell you one thing I heard, Nigel. Someone was like, "But all the risk with the metaverse, like, there's risk with anything you do. Like, there's always going to be risk. It's like you got to look at the bigger opportunity." And that's just how I think personally. But I think all these points you mentioned, like training, development, but how you hit a problem, how's this all being used in emergency services? Or what's your kind of view from that point?
So, I mean, emergency services for me is one of the most interesting use cases for this type of technology. I mean, healthcare is one we can touch on as well, but emergency services specifically, because what so many interactions that we have with emergency services are in some way, shape, or form audio driven.
Yeah.
So,
That's
you know,
true, isn't it? Always bring it up. Yeah.
you phone 999
Yeah.
or the non-emergency one, which I can never remember now, 111.
117, I think.
And you know and so you phone up and you say something terrible's happened. What a lot of people don't know is that many of the if you look at the split in a call center there, you might see that 40% are emergency and 60% are non-emergency, or 30/70 or whatever. 999 calls are categorized properly so that someone actually types out what it's about, but a lot of the non-emergency calls aren't categorized. So what that means is you've got this huge pent up kind of demand there. So and people phone up kind of Friday night and they say, is my husband in custody? And apparently this is very common. You get people phoning up and saying, is John so and so in custody? And because of data protection legislation, the police cannot say. They're not allowed to say. And so what happens is they get these calls coming in, people pestering them all the time. Now, the person who's taking that call ought to be available for an emergency call. It's the same people in the contact centers, and they get some emergency, some are not. So you've got someone tying up an emergency operator through that. So we did a lot of work with one police force to help them automatically map the demand. So literally to see what type of people are calling up. They have a lot of mental health type of calls, and particularly at the weekends and evenings, because mental health services often only work 9 to 5, so the police get the 5 to 9 and so on. And so we help them map all these different categories in order that they can look at other ways of dealing with that demand, because some of it can be self-service, some of it can be, even as simple as, if you're calling up with a custody question, please press 1. Press 1. That takes you to a recorded message saying that if the person you're calling about is over the age of 18, we're not able to tell you anything about it. If they're under 18, please press 2, and that will put you through to someone. That could cut 10% of your calls out at the weekend.
And compound that is awesome. If you can compound that on the time you get back over time.
Totally. So it means that when you're phoning 999, your call will go through more quickly because you've taken these non-emergency ones away. But then flip it on its head. So think about the other side of this. So you're the operator. Okay, we've talked about the citizen side here, but let's look at the operator side. So the operators are under tremendous stress all the time. I mean, can you imagine some of the stories that people hear? You cannot harden yourself to some of those stories, and sometimes we hear some of these things on the news, and you don't hear the worst ones. I can tell you do not hear the worst ones.
Have you read quickly? Have you read the book, Nigel? It's a really great book called "This Is Going to Hurt." It changed my view. It's a funny book. It's a sad book. It's a distressing. It's all sorts of it. It sends you on a roller coaster. But I just want to say to you, Nigel, like, that book is one that really made me think. I appreciate the NHS before. That really made me appreciate it, because you just think the stuff they must go through. It's insane. But yeah,
exactly. So one of the things that we're working on at the moment is helping with wellness for emergency services operators. So to actually detect when they themselves are under strain, and we're looking at a number of different ways of doing it. Partly it is through the voice, because you can actually tell the type of phraseology people use, even changes in tone over time as people become slower and deeper. But also by using biometric devices as well. And by biometrics, I mean something like this. So you can actually, so what you do is you look at what people are saying, how they're saying it, you match it with a heart rate, and that actually gives you a really good indication of whether someone is stressed. And what that means you can do is make sure that the next call they get is a non-emergency one. Because what might happen is someone might get a rape, then they might get a road traffic accident, and these are very distressing for people. So you want to take them out the front line. And that, I mean, that can apply to anything really, but particularly for emergency services, the ability to help reduce burnout and stress amongst operators, because frankly, it's terrible for the people, but it's also very bad for the efficiency of the call center. Because if you've got an operator who suddenly gets signed off for 2 or 4 weeks with stress, you've got a hole in your capability, which again is bad for citizens. So there's this kind of virtuous circle that you can build. And these systems are actually, I mean, surprisingly easy to install and tune. The problem always, of course, is that when you're dealing with public sector type of things, there are very long budget times, and also, budget is tight in the public sector. So we tend to find that we do kind of, the deals that we do in the public sector tend to take longer, but are normally at a lower value. Mainly because we want to get this stuff in there. We think it has enormous social value. And in fact, flipping that on its head, we're involved with an organization called Justice for Change. And it's an American organization run by a partner of ours called Relativity. And we provide that same technology for free to help with miscarriage of justice cases.
Love that.
And so we did one recently where someone was, I think, 29 years they've been locked up for. 29 years accused of murder. But the person who was incarcerated claimed to have been tortured by police. And so we were asked to analyze something like over 1,000 phone conversations in order to help with this case. Which is, and we're, and that's the point, we're happy to do this sort of thing for free because it has real social impact. Voice voice is great for talking to your watch or your Alexa device and that type of stuff, but there are some really important things that can be done with it. But again, you have to be careful because people are talking about, well, we can use it in healthcare to detect depression, for example. It's very difficult, actually. It's very difficult to detect that type of illness in a single interaction. Quite often it's something that you need to track over time. So we're looking at applications of where you can actually get people to engage verbally with a computer over time without a human involved, a chat bot or that type of stuff, just to track the changes in their behavior over time to help to see whether people are recovering from depression, whether they're maybe going into depression. And I have a very personal interest in mental health and well-being. So these are areas that we think are really worth pursuing.
I love that, to see how it is. It just makes you open your eyes, doesn't it? There we are, or the stat of the top 3 things are for reading the news, playing music, and turning the lights on and off. And you've got all these angles where you can essentially save people's lives, Nigel, and you can bring them back to life if you're doing that case that you mentioned, bringing them out of prison time and from wrongful conviction or whatever it might be, or just from being bullied while they're in conviction, which is obviously not fair. But do you think, to switch it up a little bit, do you think there's a bias to that, or a bias to that happening, like where someone might turn around and say, well, actually that was really important for X, Y, Z, and because it's, I don't know, is that the right question to ask? How do you get across that fine line? I'm not saying it from a wrong view. I'm just saying people have their own personal opinions, don't they, on what's important to them at that time and what's not important, and how do you categorize that, I guess, and how do you get over that bias, if that's better worded?
Well, bias in AI in general is one of the hottest topics, I would say, at the moment. So, I mean, speech recognition, fortunately, if you're just looking at pure play speech recognition, which is literally I say something and I turn it into text, the bias there is more in terms of accessibility for people outside the norm, quote unquote, outside the mainstream. That can be people who've got heavy accents. That can be people who come from low resource language areas. And so we do a lot of work training models with huge variety of different accents, a lot of and as I said, your speaker last week was talking a bit about this as well,
Yeah.
about making sure that what's produced is contextually correct. Even down to silly things like street names. So if I say Belvedere Road,
Yeah.
it should be ROAD and not RODE. It's
Yeah.
just so there's a lot of
Hard.
work goes
Yeah.
into making that happen, and we've done a lot of work over the last few years in building out our language capability. I think we've got 29 languages and dialects now,
Awesome.
and we're looking at increasingly less well understood and less well known languages.
Yeah.
Well, there's one which is incredibly widely spoken but is not well supported, is one called Bahasa, which is actually what people speak in Indonesia. And Indonesia is one of the most populous countries on the planet. So, but then we also do things like Catalan. So if you happen to be in Barcelona, and funny enough, there's a lot of financial services work gets
Yeah.
done in Barcelona, in Catalan. So we're always looking to try and expand that.
Yeah.
But the wider thing, because we do a lot of work in speech recognition, but we're also doing a lot of work in terms of natural language understanding, natural language processing, and things like emotional analysis and sentiment analysis, and those are the things.
Yeah.
And what we've found is that a lot of the big new models that we're seeing, and none of what I'm saying is news here, but a lot of them, because of what they're trained on, are inherently biased in all sorts of ways. They're
Yeah.
anti-Semitic, they're racist, um, they're skewed in all sorts of different ways, and this when it's even down to things like the a lot of the image-based ones. We're seeing these great text-to-image ones at the moment.
Yeah.
Those are heavily curated. Before Google released to you this marvelous new image, they are heavily curated
Yeah.
to make sure that you only see what they want them to see.
Yeah.
So what we do with those types of models is we're spending a lot of time. Actually, we have actual people reviewing it, and
Yeah.
then we build these kind of semi-supervised models which allow the system to kind of begin to understand it themselves. It's like kind of baby steps moving up to adulthood, really, but on this data, and doing things like trying to take pronouns out, kind of. So I mean, really, really quick example, but and I'm sure a lot of your listeners would have heard this one, but Amazon had a huge problem using exactly this technology to when they were hiring people, because what
Yeah.
they did is they took all of the CVs of all of the successful candidates that they had,
Yeah.
and they put them into a machine learning tool,
Ah,
and
so
that was the
yeah.
basis.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what it meant is that all they ended up recruiting was young white males,
Yeah.
because the system recognized when it saw, even if you took the names out, if it saw a college which was considered to be a women's college, say for example,
Yeah.
then it would perceive that as a negative, because that was seen in all of the CVs where people had been rejected,
Yeah.
girls' schools, all of these things. So, you have to be very, very careful. And sometimes bias is weird like that. You think I'll take all the pronouns out, but I won't think about whether somewhere is a girls' school or a boys' school, or
Yeah.
considered to be a university that more women go to than men. So a lot of you have to, and we are training. Bear in mind that a lot of these models are being trained on terabytes, if not petabytes, of data.
Yeah.
So
Pretty
you've
amazing.
kind of got to take a step back and
Yeah.
say you need to review all of the training data.
Yeah.
So rather than this kind of nuclear rush for let's build an even bigger model than we did before, I think a
Yeah.
lot of researchers are taking a step back and saying, actually, what we need to do is look at the data first. And if you talk to my data science team, I've got a whole bunch of researchers who work for me. They will say that 90% of the challenge is getting the data right. The training is actually easy, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
It's the data. And so yeah, we wrestle with this. I'm not saying that everything we do is beautifully debiased, and it isn't. But at least we go into it with our eyes open, saying we're doing our absolute best to
Yeah.
try and be as neutral as we can
Yeah.
in terms of what we're doing.
Well, it matches with a lot of people I speak to. I speak to quite a few people that are very well written and read and developed in the data area. And like Susan Walsh is one that jumps to mind. And she's great with her classification. She was telling us on one of these shows, like if you just start with the data, if it's not formatted right, how am I supposed to help you, and how's it supposed to learn, and how's it supposed to get it right? And it's like it's a constant, ongoing process. But I'd like to ask you, Nigel, and going back to your point you made around different languages. So you said 29 languages. I'll give you a situation. When I went to university, I went to Nottingham Trent. I met someone from Newcastle, and I can. He's one of my good mates now, Matty. And funnily enough, he's now a A&E doctor doing emergencies in London at the hospitals. He gets rotated around. But when I first met him, I generally couldn't understand him. I was like, he has such a strong accent, and I imagine maybe that's the same at a hospital in Newcastle or up in Scotland. Is that how does that class as a whole new language, or does that class as a whole slang of a language that you have to run different sets on and different learning on? How does that work?
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I told you I was in America for a year, and I've been there a week, and someone stopped me and said, "Sorry, we can only understand one word in three that you're saying." Because I grew up in Romford, and you know,
Oh yeah,
I had a particular, my accent was I've now got this kind of I developed this well modulated accent mainly so I could speak to Americans when I was at school. So yeah, it's a real issue, and no one's perfect in this arena, but what we all try and do, this will be anyone in the speech recognition industry, it's not just us.
yeah,
What we try and do is get as much data as we can
yeah,
that is specific to particular areas. So we've got a whole load of training data, which is, people from Glasgow, people from Edinburgh, people
right,
from Newcastle, people from Northern Ireland, people from the south of Ireland, um, you know, people who are non-native English speakers speaking English. And
yeah,
it's really only by gathering all of this data together. And yeah, if we get to an area, so the police force we were working with was from the northwest, and so we gathered a whole load of data, which was and basically what you've got to do is you've got to get someone speaking and a transcript of it, and
yeah,
that's I mean, it sounds really simple. It's not quite as simple as that, but that's the building block for speech recognition. And
yeah,
so what you need, it's almost like, what do I need to do? Why don't we take every episode of Coronation Street and get all the subtitles off it? I mean, if only it were that easy, right? But that's the type of, that's the type of idea,
yeah,
is to try and is to get that sort of data. And if you look at a company like ours, a lot of the investment and time and money that we've spent over the years is in data acquisition.
yeah,
It's not, it's not in anything else. It's literally going out, labeling, classifying, and merging data,
yeah,
in order to make this stuff happen. And as every and to me, actually, it's one of the big problems in the industry is that, and this is not just speech, this is all kind of NLP, AI, all of these things,
yeah,
is but speech is a particularly bad one, that
yeah,
there is a real scarcity of good data to work with.
yeah,
So we're a small London-based organization, who, by kind of just sheer hard work and bootstrapping, have
yeah,
got ourselves to a point where actually we're recognized globally
yeah,
as leaders in a number of areas, that we work in the legal area, in financial services. People come to us because of our expertise. But to get there, we had to spend an enormous amount of time and money going out and gathering data. But if you're a Google or an Amazon or someone like that, who are and if you look at who are the big players in speech recognition and in kind of NLP and such, like Google, Facebook, Amazon, IBM to a degree,
yeah,
they are the really big players in this, and they
yeah,
have unlimited funds,
yeah,
and also access to everyone's data.
yeah,
That's, think about it. All Amazon they've got teams of people all over the world listening to your Alexa conversations.
yeah. Just
Listening to what you're
very,
saying, and
very exciting.
and and transcribing it,
Yeah,
and then putting it back in again. I mean, the only people who don't do that are Apple. Apple are actually quite good about this. They kind of do, but they're much better about kind of disaggregating the identity from the data, and they've got a big thing about that.
yeah,
But still, and it's something which people really forget, is that every time you use any of these services, if you're doing captioning, if you're using a voice bot,
yeah,
99.9% of the time, that data is being sent to one of 4 or 5 of the major the major AI companies in the world, and they can hear and listen to everything that you are saying.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything. And in fact, if you Google have even got a pricing tariff which they make available where you actually agree that they can transcribe everything you've said. So not only can they listen to it, they can then use it for their own purposes, and you pay them to transcribe this stuff like you automatically, and then they get to use your data. I mean, it's madness.
Pay them.
So
Crazy. Pay them to use that whole model of like, yeah, we get to learn from
exactly,
you, and you pay
that's
for, and
right.
you have to pay us for it.
You have to pay. You have to pay for it. So a lot of the work that we do, and this is kind of where my legal background comes in, is around security and privacy. So we are very big on allowing people to process their own data in their own environments. It could be Docker, it could be private cloud, but
Yeah.
we've recently developed some technology which actually enables people to do this in the encrypted domain. So
Nice.
literally, I can encrypt an audio file right here
How does
on
it
my
work?
desktop.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually it's using there's kind of encrypted enclave technology. So there's a ways in which you can process things in a kind of a hardened shell.
Yeah.
But normally that only operates between kind of the motherboard and the chip that sits on it, which is
Yeah.
all right if you've got control of the computer. But what
Yeah.
we're talking about is doing it remotely. So we've developed something, got a patent coming through on it at the moment, which
Nice.
actually enables you to kind of receive a key from the encrypted enclave,
Yeah.
encrypt it yourself, send it all the way through. It gets processed in the encrypted enclave, re-encrypted using a key that you've supplied, and sent all the way back again. And we see this as a complete game changer, because what that's actually going to do is it's going to give you all the advantage of the cloud. Because let's face it, if I want something transcribed, do I want to have to go to Nigel at Intelligent Voice and say, Nigel, can you install the Docker container for me? And yeah, we need professional services and yada yada. Or do you just want to go to audio.google.com or whatever it is and upload your file? You want to go and do that, right? So what we want to do is make it as easy as that for people,
Yeah.
but without the possibility for someone at the other end to actually listen to it.
Yeah.
I tell people, I don't want your data. I
Yeah.
don't want to hear it. I don't need to hear it.
Yeah.
Because we do legal, financial services, healthcare, insurance, some of this stuff is like super sensitive. It's not
Yeah.
right that we should have it. And
Yeah.
yet people are happy. I mean, seriously, if you think about you on a Zoom call, you can hit a button, Zoom transcribe everything,
Yeah.
right? Just get sent off there. Um, if you use Twilio, Twilio is a great one. They
Yeah.
use Google. So
Yeah.
90% of people who are building VoIP type applications at the moment use Twilio, and you can hit a button which says do transcription. Now your voice, you might not even know this when you're on the phone, gets sent to Google, and they do the transcription and send it back again.
Yeah.
So there's all these companies who are building chatbots and this, that, and the other. A lot of the time, your data is going somewhere you don't want it to go. It's just
Yeah.
just something for people. The ease of cloud technology can mask some horrendous security concerns sometimes.
Yeah. I feel like my mum and dad would have something to say if they heard how many times I sometimes use certain words when I'm sending voice notes to mates, and you think if that's all being captured by WhatsApp, so they did a massive U-turn literally yesterday or 2 days, and they've basically gone back on everything they were. Well, from what I've read, like I've only read it, I browsed it very quickly, but you think I didn't even clock that. Like I send voice notes through there quite regularly, like sometimes to people that are talking to us from a PR company, sometimes people that are family, sometimes that people are friends. And you think that they might be just using all that to figure out for ad services or something, to think, well, what ad do we show you through Meta or through Instagram?
They're gonna come back to haunt you, those voice notes, one day, Tom. I'm telling you.
They'll come to get me, Nigel. But I want to ask something. What do you think about this then? Because all I hear about voices, maybe I'm going down the wrong angle here. Maybe there's another area. I only hear about it in English. I never hear about there being much research or much, like you said, 29 languages. Is that right? Or have I just assumed that most of the investment is for English? Because I know it's one of the most spoken languages. But I mean, what about if you want to speak in, I don't know, Bengali, or you want to speak in Japanese, or you want to speak in French, something that's maybe I think French is pretty commonly spoken across France. But you know what I mean. These kind of these languages that might not have such international guidance, because whenever I go abroad, most people speak English. It's why I've been quite naive, along with a lot of other people, not to learn another language, and I think that's fair. But how does that work with other languages, and is it a bigger investment in English compared to others, or have I just got that assumption wrong, Nigel?
I mean, it is. I mean, clearly, English and Mandarin, actually. So you can pretty much guarantee that anything that you see being done in English, even and things like NLP and all that sort of stuff, if you see a big model that's been done in English, it will have been done in Mandarin as well, because there's massive, massive investment. But China's like a parallel market. We don't see it, but it exists there in exactly the same way.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely, without question, English is bear in mind that speech recognition technology in its modern form was funded
Yeah.
exclusively by the US government. So, all the research that was done in the 70s and 80s that got us to where we were was
Yeah.
funded by the American government. So, therefore, English was the natural place to start. But what we do know, though, is that because of the way, so what used to happen with speech recognition
Yeah.
is you would you'd speak into a microphone, and that audio file would be sliced up into tiny little pieces, and those tiny little pieces were the features of your voice. That's what it was called.
Right.
Those features that the system would then try and figure out a phonetic representation of it. That phonetic representation would then be fed into something called a language model, or it was a dictionary first, effectively try and match what it was, put into a language model, and something came out the other end. That was
Right.
very rules based, and so quite inflexible.
Yeah.
Where we've gone to now, though, is that modern neural nets are capable of learning one language and then adapting the network to another language quite quickly,
Yeah.
because they kind of disintermediate between what is the features of speech as a whole, because there's a whole bunch of things it has to understand just for it to understand its speech,
Yeah.
and then what differentiates an individual language. And so with in some cases only hundreds of hours of audio, so we might train a base English model on 20 or 50,000 hours worth of English audio to really make it understand what language sounds like, as well as English. And then, but you can actually use hundreds, sometimes 1,000 or so hours of another language to do transfer learning to get it to understand something else. Might not be quite as good as the English one, but we're definitely seeing that adaptation
Yeah.
is becoming easier than it used to be. But I'll take you back to the point I made earlier.
Yeah.
You need to be able to get the data for the language that you want to do. So let's say that I want to do a South African language. South Africa has quite a number of official languages. I still need to find that data, and so we try and work with universities. So you'll find there are pockets of university research going on where people are trying really hard to gather this data, but they might
Yeah.
only turn up with 35 hours, and it's like, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
I need another 965, if you don't mind, to get us there, because it's expensive. It's
Yeah.
gathering data is incredibly expensive. So yeah, there is a massive bias, and it does mean that in terms of access to voice enabled services, one of two things is going to happen. Either someone somewhere is going to release really big data sets, or we find a way of building networks that understand people much more generally. That's one possibility. That's
Yeah.
moving more towards the kind of artificial general intelligence side of things, which is a long way off, and we all know it's a long way off.
Go down,
you
get
know
lost in a rabbit hole down that conversation.
yeah, exactly. Or, and I think this is more likely, what we're
Yeah.
going to see is a loss of a lot of indigenous languages. Because if people want to enter the modern age, call it that, every age thinks it's the modern age, right? So
Yeah.
this is our modern age, which is the ability to chat away to my phone and it does stuff for me. To be able to use simple things like voice enabled services. I don't want to talk to a human half the time. I just like
Yeah.
to be able to, I'm happy talking to a machine.
Yeah.
We may well find that people are driven to do it in in a language which they're not normally used to using. So we may see more people speaking mainstream, the top 130 or 150 languages on the planet, and because there's 7 or 8,000 different languages and dialects, you can see those dying out because the systems don't exist to enable people to interact with modern technology in those languages. So there's a real, there's a growing awareness of that danger.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think it's a good consideration to have, to look at it and to understand it. And do you think so? Looking at it from quite an interesting side, you mentioned it there. There's a possibility, Nigel, of maybe older, more traditional languages that we use. Can you use voice, or do you know of any ideas of how voice is used in a way of bringing it from an educational standpoint to bring old languages back? I don't know, like if Egyptian spoke in a certain language. Because there's this thing at the moment I've seen, it's incredible, and it's this technology basically where you can bring a dead person alive, and you can bring, I don't know, someone like name anyone that's passed away, and you can bring back Steve Jobs if you wanted to, or if you want to bring back or you want to bring a painting alive, or you want to bring Rosa Parks alive, or whoever it is, to talk, and you can mimic them through, and it can learn basically how your facial recognition works, so you can look at it from voice. Do you reckon there's that possibility to bring back a full, authentic talking Tutankhamun or something? Is that possible with voice?
It's here. I mean, it's certainly there are all of the building blocks are here. So speech synthesis is actually, to me, one of the most frightening technologies on the planet. It really is, because let's look at this way. You get a spam email, right? You can detect a spam email. It's actually quite easy to do. One of my employees almost got ripped off by something which was purporting to be from a senior manager in the organization, and it was only when they asked him to send Google gift cards, because he was like, I was like, why am I sending Google? But if you got a phone call from your boss saying, hey, it's me, and I'm stuck, I'm stuck in the States, I can't get hold of anyone, can you just wire me $200 so I can get home? You'd be like, yeah, of course I would. So the whole thing around voice spoofing and detecting voice spoofing is really important. We do a lot of work on synthesis, and one of the reasons we do work on synthesis is actually to help with training data. It's a really interesting new area, that if you can get a computer to generate training data itself, the cost of that training data plummets, because actually I can now add 500 or 1,000 or 20,000 words which I've not got transcribed, but I can get the computer to say it, and I can get to say in lots of different ways. Because at the moment there's only 30 voices on the planet which have been properly synthesized. But if I can make it sound like Nigel, I can build a speech recognition system which understands everything Nigel says perfectly. So I can build hyper adaptive things using speech synthesis. So I mean, the idea of saying I can go, and for people who were recorded, it's easy-ish, right? I can go back and find, Einstein talking. I can take the noise out because it'll be a bit crackly and that sort of stuff, and then I can resynthesize them. And we did this a while ago, John Wayne, just for a laugh. So we got a whole load of John Wayne things and got him to say various things, including, and then someone in the office synthesized me. And and then sent me this voice file in my voice, suggesting that I doubled their pay. Nigel says that Neil should have his pay doubled. But it's, so going back to your voice notes,
a real risk.
think about your voice notes. If you got a voice note which sounded like someone you knew asking you to do something, you would do it. And going back to the call center thing, one of the things we spoke about at the beginning, call centers are still seen as one of the easiest targets for fraudsters. It's quite difficult to crack through a computer system. If you do, you get everywhere, right? But you get people phoning up a call center, and there will be a fake crying baby in the background, literally recording of a crying baby. So, and someone saying, my husband's away, I've lost my credit card, I can't get into my account. Because you can have emergency cash sent to
Yeah,
you at cash points. I've lost my ATM. Can you get, £200 sent? A baby's crying. And so that form of social engineering is widely used. If you could get through the biometrics using
yeah,
the fake voice, so yeah, there's a really interesting upside to it, preserving lost languages, um, learning languages. So I saw a great thing yesterday about someone who is using synthesis to help people understand where they get things wrong when they're learning a new language. So say
yeah,
that I get my R's and my W's mixed up because of the way I speak natively, it will
yeah,
synthesize how it should have been said using your own voice and saying, this is what you should sound like. So
yeah,
amazing possibilities, but like as you said, like every technology, right? There's an upside and there's a downside to it. And
yeah.
speech synthesis, maybe because I'm in the business, just frightens the pants off me. It really does.
Well, it kind of opens up a lot of areas for ideas for me, and a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of considerations, right? So I always think it's fair and fair and fair. But I think that's some great points, and that's really made me think like about how much we use voice, and if someone, like, what if I get a call after this, like, would you wire me this money or whatever? Just like, oh, that's a weird thing for my friend to
Don't do
suggest.
it.
Like,
Don't
really?
do it.
Yeah, exactly. Be more cautious now, Nigel. So you taught me a good lesson. We've got a couple of questions from the audience. Are you happy to bring them on?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Some good people from who've got some PhDs with them. And Julia has got one question. So Julia is a regular on the show, and always a pleasure to have you. She said, "How much error you allowed to correctly detect the true and fake inquiry in people's voices?" So we were talking about it earlier, a bit about the context and a bit about human error, but maybe on a answer this in a different way or more specific. But she hasn't left any other comment about what it is, but fake injury, whatever it might be, a broken knee or something more serious.
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of fluffiness to this, is the only way I can say. So, you agree with the client what seems to be a reasonable margin of error based on previous inquiries. So what you'll quite often do is you'll run through what's effectively a kind of human machine feedback loop, where you will send something through to a human and say, computer believes this, what do you think? And the
Yeah,
human will kind of agree or disagree. So those thresholds are, you start with what you think it's going to be, and
yeah,
then you refine it over time. So I'd love to say, 3.75%. But actually it's very much more nuanced than that. It is about introducing the human into the loop to allow the computer to learn from the human as well
yeah.
as learning from the data.
Great answer. Really appreciate that. That's a good one for you, Julia. The next question we have is from Khaled. So Khaled Bassett has asked, "Hi, Khaled here from Autosphere. How do you deal with bilingual statements? So a medical statement in a local language, punctuated with English technical terms." That's a good question. We're kind of
That is
talking.
a fantastic question. I really like that one. Yeah. So what Cal is describing there is something called code switching, and this is where, and you see this in a lot of different contexts as well. So we see it in financial services where people are, because often English is the trading language, but the two people who are communicating with each other may be Spanish, for example. So they'll
Right.
trade in English, then they'll switch out to Spanish, they'll go back again, and we have to be able to detect that and detect what's being said, because
Yeah.
it's important from a compliance perspective that you can get that. And medical is kind of doubly interesting because there are so many English terms in it. And
Yeah.
we've got two approaches to this. So we can train literally bilingual models. So models which, and do you know what I said earlier about how you start with English, then you can fine tune it for other languages?
Yeah.
Well,
You can
what you
learn.
can effectively do is fine tune it for two languages simultaneously.
Got
So
it.
because computers are stupid, they don't know what's Japanese and what's English. They know what's Urdu and what's English. All they know is that I've got symbol A and symbol B.
Yeah.
And literally what we'll do, I'm probably giving away some massive intellectual property advantage to someone here, right? But we might say that the English will use lowercase characters and the French will use uppercase characters. And so
Right.
we can distinguish which is which. We as humans can distinguish. So we'll know if it's French or English.
Yeah.
But all the computer does, the computer just writes down what it hears. So if it's hearing English, it'll do it in lowercase, and if it's hearing it in French, it'll do it in uppercase. Um, and particularly for medical, and we've done a lot of work around medical because medical terms are extremely complicated, but very important to get right. If you're writing up medical notes, you want to make sure, right, that the dosage is right and the antibiotic is right, and also you're getting whether negation's right or not. So Nigel Cannings does not have cancer. That is much better than Nigel Cannings does. And but these are things, these small little words like not and so on get mistranscribed, KNOT, or get dropped completely. So so for this use case, we train these bilingual or sometimes trilingual models, which will distinguish between what's being said, and sometimes for like super accuracy will then determine that piece that was spoken in a different language and then rerun it through a language specific model to tighten up the transcription. So it's not, it's quite, I really like that. It was a great question. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Callum. That was awesome to hear, like how you can pull them in and use different language, and like if you're using Spanish, for example, where they put question marks at the front or whatever, and knowing that kind of difference. That's crazy. There we are.
Inverse text normalization. I know. Again, you're talking about that last week. That's a whole. It's a whole other thing. Punctuating things properly, getting the question marks in the right place.
Well, baffled me. I'm glad you've seen that one, because I'm sure, like you were saying, I was just like, God, the amount of punctuation I use, because I'm pretty well written and I'm pretty well read, and I think like it must just be not just for me, but for anyone that uses it, just how much you emphasize something. Like if someone puts 5 exclamation marks instead of 1, or like which really shows, or using capitals. I'm just like, God, like to read that data, right, Nigel? Pretty wild.
Absolutely.
I guess just being to finalise and finish off, is there any areas that you're seeing at the moment that personally excite you, Nigel, for voice being used, for any things that maybe from a business side or from a personal use side, like we were talking about the Alexa at the start? Is there anything where it really gets your blood pumping of seeing what it will turn into, because it's such an exciting area that maybe isn't that common, or something that people don't really think about? I mean, there's been a lot on this call that people haven't thought about, especially for me, from call centers to fraud, all these different points. But what about you, Nigel? Is something that really get you excited?
Okay, this is going to sound the most boring thing I've ever said, probably, but actually, one of the things that I love and I use a lot is recording meetings and then being able to get a summary of it. Now, so we've got this fantastic product called Miner, right? MYNA. So meetminer.com, right? Get everyone going there. Where we enable people to record meetings, and then what it does is it basically gives you a summary of the meeting, emails it to you, emails your transcript and the whole thing in this like nice HTML viewer, and then down the side is a list of all the things that were said during the course of the call, and we're actually extending that now to like a genuine human readable summary. And what I love about it is I spend a lot of my time on calls now, video and that type of stuff, all the time. And someone will say to me, I had this a couple of days ago. Someone said to me, he said, "Do you remember on that call the other day, Nige?" And I'll try and embarrass them here, but XYZ said this, and now he said he never said that. And I said, "It's all right. I'll get the smart transcript." It's what we call smart transcript. I'll get the smart transcript and I'll open it up. And it was a 60-minute call, and in 30 seconds I could pinpoint the area where we discussed this thing. So actually, I think that we're so used to email. We archive all of our emails, right? I don't know about you. Every single email I've ever written, right, particularly in Gmail. I've archived all of my WhatsApp, so every WhatsApp I've ever written I can find.
Yeah, it's like Slack. I love Slack because I can archive it all, and it does it automatically. So I'm like, thank God, if I ever get called out on it.
But think about voice conversations. How many of us in the last couple of years have switched to voice? So why would you not be able to archive all of that, search for it, jump through it, jump to what you want really quickly? So I think, and I think that as people are getting more used to this type of communication, we'll just accept, like your voice notes. The fact is, you'd like to be able to search your voice notes. Really, I don't know whether I don't think WhatsApp has got transcription yet, but really what you'd like to be able to do is when you're searching for something, it'll pop up the voice note and say, in this voice note, actually, Tom, you said this, and you think, awesome. Yeah, I found that. Or maybe did I really say that? So I think the idea of a kind of a more personal record of what we say in a business context or in a personal context, as we get more used to voice, for me, that's going to be one of the most exciting things going forward. And I think it may take a few years till we see that kind of sea change. But
Yeah.
my prediction is, right, in 5 years' time, every single audio interaction we have, be it on the Alexa, on the phone, or something like this, on our Teams calls or whatever, will
Yeah.
always be recorded. It'll be emailed to us afterwards. So when you
Yeah.
phone up your bank, imagine this, you phone up your bank,
Yeah.
why does the bank not email you a recording and a transcript of what was said? Because as things currently stand, the only people who know what happened on that call is your bank. So
Yeah.
when you're saying, think about it, if you have a dispute later, who's got the power?
Yeah.
Oh, the bank say, oh yeah, we can't find the recording. It's happened to me before. Oh,
Yeah.
can't find the recording. So I think that there's going to be a lot more of this stuff going forward as the technology becomes cheaper, as it
Yeah.
becomes easier to use. Even something like YouTube. I mean, YouTube's got captions now, and right, I'm just going to probably shouldn't do this, but can I just share something really quickly? And I
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
if
Of
this is going
course.
to work or not. Let's just see this really quickly. Probably shouldn't really share
Yeah.
my screen. What the hell? Let's just see what happens here. So you're gonna
Appreciate
see you and me for a second, right? But I'm just gonna see this. I don't know if you can see this at the moment. This is YouTube.
it. It's
Can you
live.
see
Yeah.
that there? Yep.
Yeah.
So you see these things here down the bottom.
Yeah.
These
Tagged.
things
Yeah.
I'm going down. Yeah, these tags, right? We generate these automatically for YouTube. So
Ah,
this is a
cool.
plugin. This is a Chrome plugin, right? And through this miner there, and I can click on any of these things. So take trusted execution environment, my favorite thing at the moment. I can click
Yeah.
on that, and that takes me 30 minutes in. And this is I
See.
love Jensen.
Yeah.
We
They're
do a
awesome.
lot of work. Oh, yeah, we
They're
do a lot
keynote
of
stuff.
work. Yeah, we
Yeah.
do a lot of work with NVIDIA. But so, and I can, environmental sustainability,
Yeah.
deep reinforcement learning. So I think we're going to learn to use voice in really different ways because
Yeah.
it's a very serial medium at the moment, voice. If you
Yeah.
want to understand what's been said, you've got to listen all the way through. I mean, we've been on, an hour now. I mean, these poor people who've got to listen to the recording of this. They're going to be like, I don't listen to an hour of Nigel talking. Why can't I just jump to the
Yeah.
interesting bits? So what we've tried to do is think about how you take audio and video technology and take it from being a serial medium where you've got start, beginning, end at the end, and turn it into something where you can just find what you want. So I suppose
Yeah.
what I'm really saying is that I think the future is being able to target those bits of audio and video which are just relevant for you.
Yeah.
And that is going to change the way we use this technology. And now I'll
Massively
shut up.
helpful. Yeah, yeah, massively helpful. I get excited about that because I like it on YouTube. Like I use YouTube Premium because you can watch full sets. Like whether you want to watch AC/DC live and watch their full set of them
Yeah.
doing something or into music that I'm into, like anyone that you want to listen to, and you can pick out when they're doing a live set where that song is, and you think, oh, I love that song, I want to see it live at that festival, live at this place. And especially if I use it for educational, so I'll have a video on in the background or a review of a certain technology, I can jump to the part I'm interested about to think, send me to it. And you can't do it on LinkedIn. Like I can't do that on LinkedIn at the moment. It bloody annoys me. It's just like, I can do it on YouTube, or for the most part I can do it on YouTube, and it's such a helpful tool. So I definitely get excited about it.
I'll send you a link to the Chrome plugin, so you too will be able to have every single YouTube video that you ever go onto with these beautiful navigational tags. Happy to do it, Tom. Happy to do it.
Appreciate it, Nigel, and I really appreciate you joining us today, Nigel. We've had a good hour and 7 minutes, whatever it is, and I really, thank you for coming on, spending the time and talking around some real interesting points, which I've really loved doing. And we've had some great comments from people joining us. And I'm looking forward to the next one, Nigel. Hopefully, the next one, I'm saying this, hopefully we can do it in person at a conference or around a table. I'd love to do it because I feel like I could get lost into a lot more conversations with you, Nigel.
It's been fantastic, Tom. I really appreciate the opportunity. I always love coming on and talking to interesting people about interesting stuff. So, Tom, thanks ever so much for having me on.
Always.
And thanks to everyone for listening as well.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Catch you on the next one. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks.